Good morning, guys and girls out there, and welcome to another session of question and answers. This is quite good because a lot of questions out there that the guys always have, and then at least we can attend to them, and we've got enough expertise in the room to assist. And if we cannot assist, we can go and find out the answer and come back to you always. So this is very good, and even for our presenters to know what is happening out in the plumbing world outside there, because we are faced with a lot of challenges when we work out there, especially for the guys working in the insurance industry and maintenance world. Not everything was done perfect the last 30 years. So we have these challenges to repair and install into places that weren't up to standard. So yes, if you have all these weird questions of challenges you have out there, post them here this morning, and we are going to see how we can answer them. We have a couple of questions that have run over from last week's Tech Talk. So we're going to hand over to Richard Bailey to start off with the first question out there. Richard.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Marius. Yeah, good morning and welcome to everybody. Okay, so there was a question that was sent through on mail that came from Louis Roberts, and the question basically was around installing the same type of geyser in two different ways. Now, I'm going to just paraphrase it. So essentially what Mr. Roberts was asking is that the geysers in question are apparently, as he described them, 100 liter, 400 kPa direct solar systems. Now, they were installed on low-cost housing, and he did some of the installations and issued the COCs for them, and somebody else did, or somebody under his supervision was responsible for some other of those installations and did them. However, this person apparently had spoken to the manufacturer of the system and found out that the manufacturer, so apparently the manufacturer did not require a hot water vacuum breaker on the system, and the reason given to the plumber by the manufacturer for this is because it's a non-electrified system. So there's a couple of things. So the gist of the question is as follows: can a manufacturer, based on its assumption that it's a non-electrified system, override what the requirements of the standards are? So there's a couple of things I just want to ask Mr. Roberts to send through to us. Number one, what kind of geyser is it exactly? Because I'm certainly not aware of a 100 liter 400 kPa geyser which is non-electrified. So what have they done to make it non-electrified? Has the flange been changed? And if so, does it still comply to SANS 151, etc.? So that's the first thing. So first of all, let's identify the geyser. Second of all, is it installed at 400 kPa, or was that perhaps a mistake? And is it a 0 kPa sort of the integrated 110 liter with a tank on top, the cistern on top sort of installation? Perhaps we're talking about that. But to answer the question directly, the answer is no. A manufacturer cannot override what the requirements in SANS are. So if SANS requires 2 vacuum breakers, that's it. The fact is that the geyser, as is described in the question, the geyser is an unvented, closed pressure geyser, right? If that is the case, you need 2 vacuum breakers, you need your anti-siphon loop, you need your TP discharge, you need this, that, the next thing, all the full-on 10254 installation. So that's the answer to the question. And realistically, I would ask, perhaps just double fact check exactly what we're dealing with, what kind of system, perhaps a couple of pictures, and we can answer you definitively on that. So I think that covers it.
What are the requirements for geyser manufacturers for the geyser to be installed?
Well, that's basically the manufacturer's installation regulations or whatever, or their, what do you call it? I can't get to the word now. if you go onto the manufacturer, if you go for Quick Art or Heatech, anything, if you go onto the internet, you'll find their installation instructions, and they'll have it pertinently out there. That there's things like, let's start off and say it must have a certificate of compliance as one of their first provisos. It must be installed according to manufacturer specification, and they'll have a diagram. And they'll also state there that it must be installed according to SANS 10254, and with a few things, because that will also be their warranty.
10254. That's the easy answer.
Yeah.
10254.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, so that is, it's also part of their warranty proviso. So, it must comply to that.
Okay, thanks, Mauricio. We don't have any other questions.
Other questions. Okay, good. Yeah, well, challenges-wise, we have them out there every day when we get to these geysers, and it always seems to be geysers is the most common one that we have. But what about venting? When we get out there and we see that the venting isn't correctly done on a house, what do you do? And then obviously the first thing is, know what the standard says about venting, and then you can inform your client about it. Look at the drainage. When you get there and you see that the drainage isn't done properly, maybe, advise the client. If you do have a stoppage here, where is your rotting eye? We have it many times that, the plumbing was done on this new house, and the paving guy came in, they raised the levels around the house, and all the rotting eyes are closed up. So, that is a sort of a preventative cure that you can do for your client, and you inform him, and then obviously some work will be generated out of this as well. So you can always have a look when you get to your client, or when you're even installing the geyser and you see something which is non-compliant, make a note of it, inform the client, and it's just good practice. And obviously, it restores a bit of confidence with the consumer out there, that you know what you're talking about, and that you can always be sure that that client, if he sees that you are quite diligent in what you're doing, that he will save your number and come back to you again. So be aware.
Maurice, just to touch on that as well, to reiterate, the venting mistakes on a building is often as a result, and I'm going to use the words often as a direct result of the ignorance from an architectural perspective, and architects riding roughshod over trades. And if you can arrive very quietly and carefully, calmly, with a set of standards clearly showing that this needs to go there and it needs to be above the roof surface, no ifs, whys or buts about it. The fact that the stack, if it's inside a building, needs to be enclosed in a duct which is accessible, which can be gotten to, which allows for the maintenance of the stack. All these things, you just show it carefully, and they can shout, scream, and call you what they like, but they cannot go against what the standards say. It only serves to enhance, your reputation as a, and stand your ground. Stand your ground and say, I'm sorry, the only way that this is going to go is either if we adjust it, or if you give me a written acknowledgement that you have flouted the law, and we do it in a nice way, but that's the only two ways that this is going to go.
But I think also, Richard, again, we seem to find this, in terms of audits, we always seem to find that at the end of the job, and due diligence hasn't been done since day one. So, again, when you've got your plans, or you're seeing that there are items that are non-compliant, it's you, the professional plumber, to be able to actually bring that to their attention and provide a paper trail, which makes it a hell of a lot easier in terms of the final audit that's been conducted. As I've found, you arrive there, and sometimes the architect puts it back to the plumber, saying, well, he's not the professional, and why was he not told about this? And it just becomes a piece of string on a jersey. You just pull it, and it just ends up as being the plumber, who is the guy that is the meat in the sandwich, and he's the one that gets penalized for aesthetics over compliance.
Yeah, well, that is the importance of that thing about keeping documentation proof, Steve. from the word go. You know, as soon as you start with it, obviously in your quotation, you're going to have that a small section there that you've noted this non-compliance or whatever the case may be on the plan when you quote, and you just bring it under their attention nicely and gently. And then if you do the job, then obviously when you get to that section of the work, you advise the guy and say to him on the site meeting, make a document proof of it. On the site meeting, this was instructed by the engineer, or this was instructed by the architect. In other words, you've done your due diligence by informing them, and if they are now going to take the responsibility, you've documented it, you've notified them, then you've done your due diligence. But if you get to the end of the job and you say to them, but yeah, you know, under the slab, this pipe is non-compliant, they're going to say to you, but why didn't you tell us? Now it can't be rectified. So at the time of casting that slab, when you're putting pipes in there and they tell you you've got to do it like this, you have to go and say, all right, this is what the standard says. We have to make a note of this. Who's taking the responsibility for this job now? Is it an engineer? Are we going to do a rational design on this? What is the case? So yeah, document so that you have proof to cover yourself when it gets to the end of the job, so that responsibility is not placed in front of your door, or that you haven't informed them. That is very important. Document everything that you do.
Can a COC be issued should a geyser be non-compliant, such as no isolator? Can we make a note on the COC that the section is not compliant, or must only a non-compliance be issued?
Well, you know, obviously when you get there and you get to do this, this would be a sort of a replacement geyser, I presume. And obviously the standard says that the electrical standard says there must be an isolator within 1.5 meters. So if there's no isolator, the first thing you've got to do is actually, even before you start working on this geyser, is to inform the client that there is no isolator on this geyser. So it makes it unsafe for me to actually work on this geyser. So what you will actually have to do, in effect, is to put a man on guard at that DB board to make sure nobody's going to switch this power on. Or alternatively, the correct way would be is to say to them, first provide an isolator before we can replace this geyser. Now, we all know we can't go and wait there for an electrician to arrive to do this job, and it's going to take ages. And the client's going to tell you, okay, well, I'm going to get somebody else. So in that instance, the best would be is to tell the client is, well, you know, put somebody on guard at this isolator so that we can isolate this geyser, so that it's for you, first of all, to work safely on the geyser. Then secondly, when you get to your COC, you are going to note it. You're going to put it on there that it has no isolator. And then it's up to the owner, because according to the regulations, you cannot go and put this isolator to it. But we know that most of the guys do carry stuff like this, and if they've got an electrician that is employed in their employee, they can fit the isolator. So you give the client the option to have this isolator fitted, or whatever the case may be. Or if you've got an electrician on standby that you know of, say to them, okay, well, he can do this isolating job for you. But yes, you put it on this COC, no isolator provided, and you put it up there. That is what it is.
But I think the non-compliance is there, guys, you know, and it's there to be utilized as a tool to ensure that you cover yourself. So, and just like Marius has said, that if you get there, you know, remember the standard doesn't say we must fix everything. The standard says that we must advise the consumer, user, owner, whatever, in writing of any non-compliance. So again, it's just to cover yourself. All too often we find it as auditors, where we get to site and there's been one or two things that have been noted, but there are others that aren't. So it's just protect yourselves and go and look for that non-compliance document and utilize that as a standard. Sorry, Richard.
No, that's fine. I just wanted to add that a non-compliance notice or to include as a note on your COC for something like that is, I'm not going to say a last resort, but it is almost a last resort, okay? Because the correct way in trying to address that issue is, like Marius and Steve has said, you've got to bring it to the attention of the homeowner and strongly advise that they have this corrected, please, because it's non-compliant. If then it becomes impossible for you to do so, in other words, if the client then says, no, thank you, bugger off, I don't want to do this, then fine, have fun. But the point I'm trying to make is that you can't not say anything to the client, not even make them aware, and just by your own, just because you've decided to note it on the non-compliance section of the COC, and walk away, not having said anything to the client. That won't fly. So just because it appears as a non-compliance notice somewhere doesn't mean that you've done your job properly. It's got to be the last resort in a series of events. I hope I'm making myself.
And I think, as I said there, from an occupational health and safety perspective, when you find there's no isolator, guys, put somebody on guard at that DV board, have it switched off, and then cut the wires with somebody seeing that nobody can switch it on, and then isolate those wires with electrical tape, and then it's isolated, and then it's safe for you to work on it. And exactly the same, obviously, if it has to be reconnected, make sure that somebody is there at the board to make sure nobody's switching it on, because you're up in the roof and you can get electrocuted. So make your guys aware of it.
Must the geyser be SABS approved?
Yeah, well, that is SANS 151's job is to, if you go and look at SANS 151, that is the standard that pertains to the manufacturers, and they have to send their geyser out there. So all products must be approved type products, and therefore it must be SABS approved geyser. I would not say that I know of any geysers out there, I'm talking about high pressure vessels now, that are not SABS approved on the market. Maybe that person can just send in there if they know of any geysers like that. I don't know, Richard, do you know of any geysers? I don't know of any geysers that are not approved.
Not offhand, Maurice, I don't.
Yeah.
But look, that doesn't have to be SABS. It can be, as long as it's 151 and for example, SA watermark. If it's if it's marked as SA watermark, that's fine. If it's listed on Jaswick, it's fine. So it doesn't have to be exclusively SABS approved, but most geysers are. At the current time, most geysers are SABS approved, I believe.
Yeah, and obviously, I think all of them must, comply to being B rated. That is the other important factor. So having it B rated means it would have gone through SABS. So yes, I think it's very important. I don't think I would install a geyser which is not SABS compliant, unless I've got specific documentation or proof that it's been approved by another approved authority or something like that. Yeah.
Am I allowed as an essential service provider with a CICP permit, which installs fire hose reel and hydrant systems for a client, which is also an essential service provider with CIPC permit?
Yeah, I presume he wants to know if he can go and install this, and because obviously as essential service, if you go down to the letter of the law, it's stating that essential services like burst pipes and block drains, I think. But if it's a fire installation, yes, and there is a problem with the fire installation, I'm quite sure that he can attend to it. There's nothing wrong, because it is obviously a critical safety issue, being fire. I had a question like that that was via my phone a week or two ago, where the gentleman asked me, he is up at a big citrus farm, and the farmer wanted to install the new installation, and the fire hose reels have to be installed, and he wanted him to come and install it. That would constitute new work, because it means that system is not being maintained at that stage. It's not a critical repair sort of work. So in other words, it's not under pressure, it's not leaking, that it's not a functioning factory where it has to comply with the fire safety regulations. So that will constitute a new installation. So the answer, if he's asking, can he go and do a new installation? No, it will be constituted as new work under essential services at the current state. So he can only go and do work on a current facility which is prone to be lit up in fire, if I can put it that way. So yeah, if he wants to, he can phone me later. My numbers, maybe you can write it down. It's 082 572 0260. I'll repeat, it's 082 572 0260. and then I can just assist him with the question. Maybe there's a few more questions I'd like to ask him around that question.
Do you need to issue a plumbing COC when installing a gas geyser?
Okay, first of all, it's gas, so it says everything. It's not within our standard to install gas. It's something that we're looking into to get eventually. You know, when you go to Britain, obviously we have gas and plumbing being one. In South Africa, it's not yet. We are looking into joining into that field as well. So obviously you'll have a qualified gas installer to do the COC, and he's going to do it. So if you are the plumber that's doing the installation of the pipework, you're putting out a COC there for up to the pipework, and you can note there that gas geyser installed by other professional, other company, whatever the case may be. So you're responsible from the gas geyser, that piping going in or coming out to the gas geyser. But the gas geyser you cannot add as being part of yours, because you're obviously not qualified unless you're a qualified gas installer.
Can I just add something there, Maurice?
Yeah, sure. Yes.
Yeah, and obviously, if we're going to start as plumbers issuing plumbing COCs for those sorts of installations, other things come into play, such as flow rates. And we all know, or hopefully most of us know, that there's a requirement that a hot and cold system is balanced to mixing points. So now I've seen countless gas geyser installations where the flow rate through that gas geyser is insufficient, and when people open, if somebody's having a shower and somebody opens another point somewhere, there's a very big fluctuation in pressure between hot and cold, or vice versa. That fluctuation in dynamic pressure constitutes unbalanced pressure. I don't know how many of you know this, but when you are messing around with a dynamic system within a house, to put it simply, if you're having a shower, somebody's having a shower, and I go and flush a toilet, or I go and open a sink tap or a basin tap or anything else like that, the difference in pressure may not differ between hot and cold at my shower, but if I were to measure between hot and cold, may not differ by more than 20%. Now, in the case of so if it does, that means that my system is unbalanced. It is not a balanced pressure system. Now, in the case of a gas geyser, we have to seriously ask ourselves that question. Are we happy to certify that the system complies with this gas geyser in it? Specifically in terms of that particularly. Other stuff maybe, but that particularly is a problem with gas geysers. So you just need to ask yourself that question.
Before you get to that, is, you know, in terms of the gas geyser, because there are gas geysers out there that can, and they're fairly expensive. But I think the key thing is that at the get-go, at the start, is that although you've designed the system in terms of flow rates, etc., by plugging that in, and I'm not using the term, by connecting that into the system, is going to affect the system. So I think the key thing is to go and check those flow rates and everything else prior to that installation, to ensure that the product that's been specified to be installed is going to be able to deliver and not adversely affect the system, and then base it on that.
Thank you, Steve. Yeah, I think that is very important, and thank you, Richard. Is obviously when you're going to have this installed now, you are going to work from a plan. So that is one of the first things you have to ask is, you know, who is installing the gas geyser and what is the type of gas geyser, so you can have that information on hand. Thanks. So that is important. And then obviously if you're going to sort of have a retrofit, so you're getting to a house that has maybe got an electrical geyser, and they're going to fit a gas geyser because they want to now save a buck or two, you'll have to go and try and work out, you know, what does the system looks like, because, you know, obviously the system was not designed for a gas geyser. So have that talk with the gas installer before you just go and just put pipes out there, and then you become responsible for flow rates that are not good out there. So it's, yeah, you have to talk and do a bit of investigation before you just go and plug it in. It's not a plug and play.
Good morning. With venting, I know it's supposed to be 2.4 meters away from any opening. Does the vent need to go through the roof, or could we go around the roof with additional brackets?
Yes, they can go around with additional brackets. That's no problem if they want to go around the roof. I've seen that many a times. It doesn't always look aesthetically that good as going through the roof. I don't know why they always don't want it through the roof, because it's actually going through the eave, so it won't have anything to do with the integrity of waterproofing, etc. Going around the roof is fine. 2.4 meters away from the openings, we know there are challenges out there. Because a lot of houses are not designed in a way that you can maybe give it, especially if you're looking at cluster homing and stuff like that. The windows are close together and it might not be practically possible. That is something that you have to first of all look at the word go, look at the plans, and if it doesn't comply, talk to the architect to see where you're going to put this through, because obviously you've got to have it within 6 meters of the head of the drain. So see how close you can get it to that, and obviously if not possible, you can talk to the engineer about the rational design. It can be moved slightly somewhere else maybe if it's possible. Otherwise, I think the key point here is to get it above the roof line. That would be a first prize. So the 2.4 meters is a challenge out there, but that is something that you have to talk about on site with the engineer and look at it. Each case would be different.
No, that's about right. The two, I think it's 2 meters, and then there's another thing. There's a horizontal distance, and then there's a vertical distance. But yeah. It's there and thereabouts. But if you can get it that distance away from openings, then you don't have to go through the roof. But if you can't, then you've got to take it through the roof. And most cases, like you say, most cases in these houses, developments today, you can't actually get it far enough away from either a door or a window or both, and the only option is to take it through the roof. And I think the minimum distance above a roof covering where people can't inhabit is 100 millimeters. If it's a flat roof where there is inhabitants, in other words, where it's perhaps where people can walk as a balcony, again, it's 2.5 meters above that floor level.
All plumbers install a vent valve about 300 millimeters higher than your trap seal fittings. If it is more than 1 meter from a window, is this acceptable?
Well, I mean, so each case will be looked at in its own merits. There are 2 or 3 measurements that need to be applied, and there's a horizontal measurement minimum away from doors and windows, and failing which there's a vertical measurement above doors and windows. So you can now I mustn't say this incorrectly. I must just think, yeah, you can comply with either or. If you've got a in the past, there was a notion and a belief and a kind of a practice whereby we would put vent valves just on vent horn bends and lift it up 300 mil above the overflow level of the rim of the toilet. That is not acceptable in many cases, and I'm going to say most cases even, because of the fact that it's and there's a third measurement that I'm forgetting about, I beg your pardon. It needs to be 2.5 meters above the level of the ground, first of all. So there we go. So that cuts that out. So it has to be 2.5 meters above the ground, and at least, and then also 2 meters away horizontally and 2.5 meters above vertically, or the other way around. So as long as we adhere to that, all the other arguments fall away. You don't ask specifically, do I lift it 300 mil above the pan? You say, is this 2.5 meters above the ground? No. Okay, well then it must be. So, and that's how you go forward. So the other things come into it as well, such as the use of vent horn bends, and does that constitute a correct installation? Probably not, because vent horn bends are for other things. We call it vent horn bends, but it's not really for that. What it should be is a 110 mil junction with a vertical piece and a cap on it, and which is removable for rodding purposes. So that's the only way to ensure that that drain is accessible. So there's a lot of detail that can be fleshed out from a question like that. You know, we can talk about 2 or 3 different things, and we can have 20-minute discussions on each thing. Yeah, I have this tendency to complicate stuff. Marius, sorry.
Yeah, no, I think the best would be to go to the SANS 10400 Part P and go and have a look at that sketch out there, or SANS 10252 Part 2, and then go and read it. It's quite an involved section, that, and I know Adrian does quite a bit of work when he does his presentation on SANS 10252 Part 2 about venting. But if you're unsure about that, then obviously talk to the engineer as well. And contact one of the auditors in the region if you have a challenge out there to get this vent through the roof or around it, or whatever the case may be. So contact one of the guys and they can come and have a look, because each one is going to be different. There's a lot of challenges out there. Okay, so we've how many questions have we still got out there?
You're going to be shocked. We have about 28 questions still left.
Is it? Okay. All right, Steve, what's your call on this? Are we going to call it and then answer them via email, or have another session?
If we're okay with that, I'm happy to continue next week, Ruben, if we can get those questions through.
Okay, thank you very much, Ruben and Steve and Richard out there. And thank you, everybody, for listening this morning, and have a good day.